The FBI has tonight released a new video of the man they think assassinated.
And seemingly vanishing the car park, leaving a dead man, a rifle, and chaos.
It was just past noon in Orem, Utah. Students and supporters filled the open plaza of Utah Valley University, waiting for a familiar face. Charlie Kirk, one of the most recognizable figures of the American conservative movement, stepped onto the stage. For years, he had thrived on confrontation, fiery debates, standing ovations, and the occasional protest. On that September afternoon, he looked ready for another round of arguments, another chance to prove his point. But within minutes, the scene turned into chaos. A single, sharp crack sliced through the air. The sound did not belong to applause, nor to hecklers. It was the sound of a rifle. A bullet struck Charlie Kirk in the neck. He collapsed before his audience, his voice silenced in an instant. Screams echoed across the campus. Students ducked for cover, and staff rushed forward, desperate to help. By the time he was transported to the hospital, it was already too late. At just 41 years old, Charlie Kirk was pronounced dead. News broke within moments. Social media flooded with disbelief. Networks interrupted programming. The founder of Turning Point USA, a man who built his brand on political combat, had just become the victim of an on-campus assassination. State authorities, federal investigators, and campus police launched one of the largest manhunts in recent Utah history. A hunting rifle was recovered near the edge of campus. Footprints, fingerprints, and shell casings pointed to a careful setup, a shooter who had vanished almost as quickly as he struck. Questions immediately surfaced. Was this the act of a lone extremist? Or was it something deeper, a targeted strike meant to silence a polarizing voice in American politics? Behind the gunshot lingered a storm of political anger, campus tension, and questions about whether this was simply one man's violence or a symptom of something much larger. This story is not just about the end of a public figure. It is about the fracture lines running through American society, about how words can inflame, and about how a single trigger pull can alter the course of political discourse. If you want these stories told with clarity, with analysis, and with justice in mind, subscribe to Echoes of the Court. Here, every verdict whispers a deeper truth. The shooting unfolded in broad daylight, yet the details remain chillingly elusive. Witnesses say the shot rang out around 12:20 in the afternoon. Kirk had just begun engaging with students when his body stiffened, and the crowd realized something was terribly wrong. The bullet had torn through his neck, and within seconds he collapsed. Panic rippled across the plaza. Phones were raised to call 911, while others recorded fragments of the chaos that would soon circle the globe. Investigators rushed to secure the area. What they found painted a troubling picture. The trajectory of the shot suggested it had come from above, possibly the roof of a nearby building that overlooked the event space. That vantage point gave the shooter both cover and precision. A bolt-action hunting rifle, chambered in .30-06, was recovered in a wooded strip adjacent to campus. Near it, they discovered footprints and fingerprints, but no suspect. The shooter's choice of weapon was deliberate. A hunting rifle with a telescopic sight could easily pierce the distance, especially from elevation. This wasn't the reckless act of someone pulling a trigger in the heat of the moment. It bore the marks of planning, scouting the campus, smuggling the weapon, and striking when Kirk was most exposed. For the students who witnessed it, the crime scene remains a scar. Some described hearing a loud pop and assuming it was fireworks before the screams told them otherwise. Others spoke of blood staining the pavement, the sound of frantic voices calling for medics, and the surreal silence that followed when Kirk was taken away. Authorities immediately locked down the university. Classes were canceled, buildings were swept, and federal agents joined state police on site. Yet, despite the rapid response, the assassin had vanished. No camera footage has yet confirmed an identity. No arrest has been made. The weapon left behind was both a clue and a taunt evidence of the killer's presence, but silence about his motives. The campus became not just a scene of tragedy, but a symbol of vulnerability. If a man as high profile as Charlie Kirk could be struck down in a place of learning, what did that say about security, about political polarization, and about the unseen hands willing to pull a trigger? From the moment Kirk's death was confirmed, the case shifted into high gear. Local police handed command to a joint task force that included the FBI, state investigators, and federal prosecutors. Their first priority: determine whether this was a random act or a political assassination. The difference would shape not only the investigation, but also the nation's response. Agents combed through surveillance footage from the campus and surrounding streets. They traced students' cell phone videos, hoping to triangulate the exact angle of the shot. Forensics experts examined the .30-06 hunting rifle left behind, dusting for prints, running ballistic tests, and comparing the weapon against federal registries. Early reports suggested partial fingerprints, but none that matched existing databases. Whoever pulled the trigger had either stayed far from the system or been careful enough to hide his identity. Then came the search for motive. Kirk was not an obscure figure. He was a conservative commentator with millions of followers and a long list of political enemies. In the days leading up to the event, his appearances had sparked protests. Some critics accused him of fueling division. Others saw him as a champion of free speech. For investigators, this meant the suspect pool stretched wide from lone extremists to organized groups. Witnesses told authorities they saw a figure on the rooftop moments before the shot, but descriptions were inconsistent. Some recalled a man in dark clothing. Others insisted it was a figure in camouflage. By the time law enforcement reached the roof, it was empty. Only footprints in the dust confirmed someone had been there. Behind the scenes, the Justice Department weighed its options. Could this be prosecuted as a federal hate crime? As domestic terrorism? Prosecutors knew the decision would resonate far beyond Utah. The penalty could range from life imprisonment to capital punishment, depending on the charges. Yet amid the evidence bags and legal memos, one fact loomed largest. The assassin had melted away into the ordinary flow of life. Somewhere beyond the police tape, a person who had silenced one of the loudest conservative voices in America was free and perhaps planning what came next. The news of Charlie Kirk's assassination spread faster than the bullet that struck him. Within minutes, cable networks broke into live coverage. Social media erupted in disbelief, and political leaders rushed to issue statements. For many on the right, Kirk was not just a commentator. He was a soldier in the cultural battles that defined a generation. His sudden death felt less like a crime and more like a declaration of war. At Utah Valley University, the aftermath was raw. Classes were suspended, the campus sealed under heavy police presence. Students who had come to argue policy now found themselves witnesses to a killing. Counselors were deployed, vigils were held, and makeshift memorials of candles and handwritten notes began to line the plaza where Kirk had fallen. The university, once a place of debate and learning, became a shrine to both free speech and its fragility. Nationally, the reactions split along predictable fault lines. Conservative figures described Kirk as a martyr, taken down for daring to speak unpopular truths. They demanded swift justice, even capital punishment for the killer once found. Liberal voices, while condemning the violence, urged restraint in politicizing the tragedy. But even those calls could not mask the reality. This assassination had poured gasoline on an already raging fire of polarization. The White House issued a statement calling it a heinous act and promising the full weight of federal resources to track down the shooter. Former President Donald Trump, a close ally of Kirk, called it an attack on all Americans who cherish free speech. In Utah, the governor labeled it a political assassination, words that carried heavy implications. It was not just murder, it was an assault on democracy itself. But beneath the headlines, ordinary citizens asked simpler, more human questions. How had security failed so catastrophically? Why had a rooftop view been left unsecured at a public event? And perhaps most haunting of all, if it could happen here, to someone so visible, could it happen anywhere? The shock was not just in the act itself, but in the sense of exposure it left behind. America, already fractured by ideology, had just witnessed one of its dividing lines marked in blood. As the investigation dragged on, speculation filled the void left by silence. Every unanswered question invited another theory. Was this the work of a lone gunman, radicalized and desperate for recognition? Or did it bear the fingerprints of a coordinated plot designed to strike at the heart of the conservative movement? Forensic experts pointed out the precision of the shot. A single bullet, delivered from elevation, striking the neck at a distance. This was not luck. It suggested training, perhaps military experience, or the cold patience of a seasoned marksman. That alone shifted suspicions. Could the assassin have been someone with tactical background, blending into the crowd as easily as he vanished? Politically, the motive seemed endless. Charlie Kirk had built a career out of controversy. His speeches lit up supporters and enraged critics. He clashed with universities, sparred with journalists, and challenged progressive icons. To some, he symbolized freedom of speech. To others, he represented division and intolerance. Investigators knew this duality made him both a hero and a target. Behind closed doors, law enforcement considered the possibility of domestic terrorism. If the shooting was meant to silence not just Kirk but an entire ideology, the case could escalate to federal courts under anti-terror statutes. That would carry the highest stakes, even the death penalty. But darker theories lingered. Some whispered about infiltration, about shadowy backers who used the assassin as a disposable pawn. Others drew parallels to past political killings, where ideology blurred with personal obsession. On campus, students speculated about infiltrators who had attended the event days earlier, mapping exits, measuring angles. Nothing was confirmed, but the idea of a calculated operation refused to fade. Meanwhile, public opinion fractured further. Supporters of Kirk rallied, declaring his blood a sacrifice for free expression. Opponents warned that glorifying him risked igniting cycles of retaliation. The nation found itself staring into a mirror, seeing not just a crime, but a reflection of its own anger, suspicion, and fear. In the absence of answers, the shadows grew thicker, and in those shadows, the assassin still moved unseen. In the weeks that followed, the search for justice became as much a legal chess game as a criminal pursuit. Prosecutors at the federal level prepared multiple charging options. If the shooter were caught, the indictment could range from first-degree murder to domestic terrorism. Each label carried its own weight. One framed the act as a crime of violence, the other as a political strike against the United States itself. The question of punishment hung heavily in the air. Utah still permits the death penalty, and federal prosecutors could also pursue capital charges. Legal analysts debated whether such a sentence would deliver justice or merely deepen divisions. Families of past victims argued that execution might bring closure. Civil rights advocates warned it would turn Kirk's assassin into a martyr, fueling more extremism. Justice, in this case, was not just a courtroom verdict, it was a national dilemma. Civil liability entered the conversation as well. Could Utah Valley University be held responsible for failing to secure its rooftops? Were event organizers negligent in not screening the area above the stage? Attorneys suggested wrongful death suits might follow, forcing the courts to weigh the duty of institutions to protect controversial voices. The idea that a university could become a defendant in the death of a speaker unsettled academia across the country. Meanwhile, every press briefing revealed the strain on investigators. They released composite sketches, asked the public for tips, and pored over data collected from nearby cell towers. But without a suspect, the case teetered on the edge of going cold. Each day without an arrest widened the gap between tragedy and accountability. And in courtrooms, even without a defendant, Kirk's death was already shaping precedent. Legal scholars wrote op-eds about the fragility of free speech when violence intrudes. Lawmakers floated new campus security bills. The legal system, still waiting for its moment of judgment, was already bending under the weight of the crime. The question remained: when justice finally arrived, would it heal or harden the fractures already running through the nation? Charlie Kirk's voice was silenced in an instant, but the echo of that shot continues to reverberate across America. For his supporters, he became more than a commentator. He became a symbol, a man who spoke until the very moment he was struck down. His death galvanized movements that saw in him not just a leader, but a martyr for free expression. Rallies in his name drew thousands. His words replayed not as arguments but as warnings of what it means when political conflict turns lethal. For his critics, the assassination was no victory. Even those who opposed him recognized that bullets cannot replace debate. The silencing of one voice no matter how divisive, underscored a grim truth. When violence enters the arena of ideas, everyone loses. The fear that followed his death touched both left and right, a reminder that no ideology is immune from becoming a target. On campus grounds, the plaza where Kirk fell has been transformed into a place of reflection. Students pass by candles, flowers, and photographs, confronted daily with the memory that a political figure died where they once gathered to argue. Some say it has chilled free speech, others insist it has made the right to speak even more sacred. Either way, his absence is now part of the landscape. Nationally, the unanswered questions remain heavy. Who pulled the trigger? Was it an individual grudge or a coordinated plot? Will justice ever arrive? Or will the assassin's shadow linger as part of the mystery? For now, the case remains unsolved, suspended between evidence and speculation. But beyond the headlines, the real legacy lies in what America chooses to learn. Will it harden into camps more divided than ever, each using his death as a weapon in political war? Or will it reckon with the fragility of civil discourse and the necessity of protecting speech even when it burns hot? Charlie Kirk's story ended with a single shot. Yet in courtrooms, classrooms, and conversations, the ripples continue. His life and his violent end became a test of how a nation faces violence, grief, and the meaning of justice. And whether America will listen to the echo or drown it out in more noise is a question only time can answer.